Every game has that one level. The one level that completely encapsulates every aspect of the wider experience. The level that brilliantly shows off not just what the game is able to achieve, but everything it attempts to achieve. The level that, if everything else in the game melted away, we'd still be left with the perfect definition of everything the game set out to do. For Super Mario Galaxy, that level is the Gusty Garden Galaxy. If you only play one level of the game, it should be this one. Everything about it is perfection of the highest order. The level design manages to be tight and inventive, pushing the game's creativity far beyond what we've seen up to this point. None of the missions rely on gimmicks. Each one feels earned and worthy of being there. And the music might just be the best arrangement of sounds from a video game to ever be loaded into a .mp3 file. So without further ado, I present to you my thoughts on the best level in one of the greatest games of all time, the Gusty Garden Galaxy. Now, the first thing I talk about here has to be the music. I really can't stress enough how great the Galaxy's theme is. The sound of it is incredibly triumphant. It's a fully orchestrated masterpiece. I put it on the same level as any historic piece of classical music. This track alone proves that the composer, Mahito Yokota, should be mentioned in the same breath as Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, and DJ Premier. Let's just take a moment and listen. Our first objective here is to use these floaty fluffs to ride the wind and ascend up to the next planet. It's a simple little mechanic, but well done, and also doesn't get overused. On the second planet, we can find some piranha plants and a mole, which I think are good enemy choices, fitting in very well with the garden theme of the galaxy. To speak about the galaxy's aesthetics, it fits closely with the standard grass-themed worlds that we've come to expect from both 2D and 3D Mario games. Blue sky, green grass, and classic enemies. But these worlds usually are some of the first we come across in a Mario game, and Gusty Garden doesn't show up until almost halfway through. The Good Egg Galaxy kind of fits this aesthetic, but really only for the first planet. Everything else there is more of a mix-up of different planet types, as a way of setting the stage for the wide variety the player can expect from the rest of the game. I bring this up because I think the placement of Gusty Garden Galaxy among Super Mario Galaxy's levels is an interesting one. It could have easily been placed much closer to the start of the game. It's not any more difficult than the Space Junk Galaxy, for example. This would have made it more like the other traditional grass-themed levels that appear at the start of many other Mario games. But Gusty Garden is not your typical Mario level. It's so much more than that. The thing about other grass levels throughout the series is that by placing them on the front end of their respective games, they can get forgotten by the end of the experience. Sure, putting them early on means that more people will play them, but you also don't want to put your very best level at the beginning. You want it more towards the middle, like Gusty Garden is, so that if a player might be feeling lethargic after a good chunk of the game, this pinnacle of game design can reinvigorate them and help push them towards the end. Anyway, the pipe on the underside of this planet can take us into another one of these spherical rooms. When we go into these, we almost feel like we're entering into another dimension. The music changes and we're surrounded by a swirling black void that feels otherworldly. It's a good time. On the next planet, this first piranha plant can lure us into a trap. When we defeat it, it'll create a vine that leads to this 1-up. All good so far, right? Well, if we swing along to get it without stopping our momentum after, we'll fly right into the black hole. What we have to do is either spin midair to stop ourselves or get this other vine to appear first, which provides something for us to grab onto and avoid a dark, cold death. It's a smart trick the piranha plant pulls on us, but seeing as they're based off of Venus flytraps, tricking us must be in their nature. Next up will be this collection of lima bean shaped planets, all with their own vine sprouting piranha plants. These guys remain a bit deceptive here because on one of the planets there's 2 paths for us to choose from. If we take the vine on the darker underside of the planet, that'll lead us right along to our objective. But if we take the vine sprouted by the plant on the top portion, we'll move over to this not so secret area where we're able to score a 1-up. Because the other vine was out of the way on the underside, it feels like that's the one that should lead to a secret. But Super Mario Galaxy is a game all about taking traditional level design and turning it upside down, or any which way, so this part is no different. Finally, we land on this cube planet, where the objective is simple: catch the rabbit. It's a nice throwback to the start of the game back on the Gateway Galaxy, and this planet is one of the more memorable ones for me. Due to its abundant and distinct content on each side, it feels purposeful, rather than merely serving as an obstacle course for Mario. Really, this section reminds me a ton of the start of Super Mario 64 DS, where you also have to chase a rabbit through a maze of hedges. It's such a strong similarity, I have to imagine the designers here were referencing it, or at least inspired by it. Speaking of this hedge maze in 64 DS, it's one of the only changes that was made to an existing course, and I think it does a good job of enriching the grounds of Peach's Castle just a bit more. This rabbit can be tough to catch, but the music and the visuals are so fun that it doesn't even matter. It feels more like we're playing tag with a friend than anything else. The level design works well and allows us to be clever by jumping over obstacles, and I especially like this 2D section through the center of the planet. Finally, after not having struggled too much, we catch up with the rabbit and get the star. The next mission in this galaxy is the Dirty Tricks of Major Burrows, which has a much bigger focus on the moles. The first planet is mostly unchanged from the last go-around, but when we make our way to the secret room on the second planet, we can now grab a rainbow star to destroy these spiky plants. This is another good use of the star. I talked about this in a previous video in the series, but to reiterate, invincibility power-ups work best when they're used to do something the player has otherwise no ability to do, rather than just to make an existing action easier. In this case, the rainbow star allows the player to destroy the spiky plants when they're not otherwise able to. Next, we land on this very small, spherical planet, which we'll soon learn is part of a larger structure. But as small as this planet might be, it exemplifies one of Super Mario Galaxy's tenets of non-intrusive tutorials. This planet is the first time in this mission we see one of the moles, which will remain a constant presence throughout the rest of the level. We can't spin right into the moles to defeat them, instead we have to ground pound nearby to stun them and then take them out. On the last planet there was a star bunny that explained this, but in case we missed it, this tiny little planet has its own built-in tutorial on how to defeat the moles. One of the first things we might notice about this planet is the rock that Mario can ground pound. There's a few of these on this planet, but this first one is placed prominently in the player's viewpoint as they float towards it. It's a subtle way of telling the player to stomp on it. The purpose of these rocks is well established by this point in the game, so the player should know exactly what to do. Ground pounding on the rock doesn't just reward the player with a coin, but because the planet is so small, that means the mole is never too far away. At that point, even a player with no knowledge of how to defeat the moles prior to this will learn the method. Stomp near them to stun them. The player is lured in by what they already know about the game to be taught something new. Even if the player doesn't notice this at first, that's not the only rock on this planet, so there's plenty of opportunity for them to figure it out. Whenever a game can accomplish something like this, teaching the player something without the use of a pop-up text box or tutorial, that's an A+ from my school of game design. It doesn't just get the job done more efficiently, it makes the player feel smarter. Stomping on the rock to discover that we can stun the moles this way makes us feel like it's something we figured out on our own, without the game telling us what to do. The game is telling us what to do, technically, but it's done so subtly and so artfully that unless we're examining the game closely, we'll never know the difference. But this little planet is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. When we take the Sling Star up, we'll find that the little sphere is just the dot of an interstellar question mark. It's a long, winding planet which showcases just how creative the level design in Super Mario Galaxy can be. The more traditional spherical planets that populate much of the game do the job well enough, but this planet is one that breaks down the barriers that ordinary level design is constantly held back by. In Mario Galaxy, any structure can be possible, and this question mark planet is the perfect example of this. Even though this is a much more linear game than 64 or Sunshine, segments like this can lend themselves to a more sandbox-like experience. It can be a ton of fun just messing around and seeing what we can do in this wild, wacky gravity, like jumping from one end of the planet to the other. To move on from this planet, there's 3 moles we have to defeat. In such an untraditional level geometry, it could be tough to keep track of where Mario or the enemies are. Thankfully, these dirt paths on the planet's surface aren't just an aesthetic addition, but they're also the routes that moles dig along. This makes the whole thing much more manageable, and it's not too difficult to just find a path and run along it until we find one of them. Before we make our way to the next planet, we can actually take a detour to this big metal ring. Normally we'd fly through it, but if we grab one of the pole stars as we're passing by, we can land on it. There's nothing that substantial here, aside from the regular star bits and coins, but it's decently large for something that's entirely optional. optional. There's not many missable planets in Super Mario Galaxy. Normally the game just leads us along a straightforward path. It's a fun planet to just run around on and see all the different ways gravity twists around you. Plus, it reminds me a lot of this large structure from the Wooded Kingdom in Mario Odyssey. Next up though is something really special. You thought the question mark planet represented the peak of Super Mario Galaxy's creativity? Oh, think again. This next section might just look like 3 giant apples floating in the sky, which for now, that's all it is. But in a moment, it'll be so much more. What we have to do here is ground pound on these stumps, which will make a giant worm appear from our current apple and move on to the next one. Now this represents Mario Galaxy's creative peak. It's the type of thing that couldn't be done in any other game. The worm has his own gravitational pull, which makes moving from the apple to him to another apple feel so fluid and effortless. The idea of a worm in an apple is one that's taught to us by kindergarten, a universal concept that's perfectly executed in 3-dimensional space. The wigglers are also the perfect enemy to add here, and the twists and turns of the worm's body make running on him an absolute delight. He even has a cute little face with buck teeth. We make a quick stop on this little planet, which is mostly here to just let the player catch their breath and grab a life mushroom, and then it's on to the boss fight. To defeat Major Burrows, we basically have to do what we've done with the rest of the moles. Ground pound next to him, and then hit him with a spin. What sets this boss fight apart from any others is its utilization of a fully 3D space, which adds an extra layer of interest. Most of the other boss fights take place in a flat area, which doesn't give them much advantage over boss fights from any other platformer. Super Mario Galaxy is a game all about turning gravity every which way, so it's nice to see a boss besides Dino Piranha take advantage of it. If you remember the end of my video on the Ghostly Galaxy, I talked about how a lot of the bosses in this game are cute and silly looking, and Major Burrows is no exception. The way he runs away from us after we've pushed him out of the ground is simply adorable, with his little tail sticking out as he panics. There's a time and place for intimidating boss fights, but the Mario games are not it. One nice touch after we've defeated him is how the Star Bunny hops down to thank us. I appreciate when NPCs show me gratitude. Once we grab the star, it's time to move on to the final mission. Once again, we start off by using the floaty fluffs, but this time there's actually some threats in the air, by way of these spiky plants. I think their inclusion is smart, however, I do wish they were spaced a bit closer to the main pathway, to act as obstacles we have to actively avoid. As they are now, we can float straight along without having to worry about them. These next 2 Lima Bean planets are straightforward, and then we end up on this next one, which is a collection of spheres covered in spiky plants and boulders. It's similar to the question mark and worm planets of the previous mission, in that it takes on a long winding shape, but with many more threats than either of those. I think that's good, as it demonstrates a progression of difficulty from level to level. There's 2 ways we can approach this planet, both with different outcomes. The first is just to go straight on forward, avoiding the hazards. Or, if we're daring, jumping over the plants and smashing the boulders. We won't be able to defeat this golden chain chomp, but we will be able to take the launch star at the end to the next segment. However, if we do want to defeat this golden chain chomp, we're going to have to rewind back to the previous planet. Here we can grab a rainbow star, run along as fast as we can to make our way to the gold chomp, and boom, we're looking at one of Super Mario Galaxy's bonus stars. I know I'm only talking about the main missions on the main galaxies in this series, but I do want to discuss this secret star for a moment. One thing I really like about it is because we can't get it if we've already landed on the planet without the rainbow star, it requires foresight and planning ahead. In addition to that, the game creates a sense of urgency by requiring us to bring the rainbow powers from one planet to the next. It creates the go 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 feeling of tension that you want in a player, especially when you're going to reward them with something as significant as a power star. In the next section, the game takes a drastic shift in style, in both the visuals and the music. Rather than the booming, celebratory song we've been hearing so far, things scale back to be more quiet and serene. It's a big change, but the level design matches it, going from very organic, brown earth and green grass planets to these more artificial, metallic structures. Once we collect the 5 star chips, the galaxy turns into what's practically a Super Mario 3D world level, and brings back the original underground theme. One odd addition here that I enjoy, but question, is the sign at the beginning telling Mario to watch his step. Oh, so you mean I shouldn't fall into the abyss here? Ah, that's so helpful. This section essentially involves us flipping the gravity around to make our way to the end of this block course. It's funny because this whole portion is very similar to the level Crazy Gadget from Sonic Adventure 2. It's pretty much the exact same thing, running along a geometric level and hitting switches to change the gravity. And this isn't the only instance of gravity mechanics in Sonic Adventure 2 either. Super Mario Galaxy did it better, definitely, but Sonic did it first, which should count for something. Landing on the Goombas after we've switched the gravity on them is pretty fun, and the whole thing feels like the designers were really trying to get the best bang for their buck out of the game's mechanics. It's a very unique part of this galaxy, thanks to how disconnected it feels from everything else. After we dodge the barrage of cannon fire, it's time to grab the star. And that just about does it for the Gusty Garden Galaxy. This world might be the closest to 3D game design perfection that we currently have. The only thing I would change about it is that I'd swap the second and the third mission. I think having a boss fight at the end feels like a more natural conclusion than an abstract platforming sequence, plus that mission has some of the best planets in the entire game, so I'd prefer they save the best for last. But within each mission itself, you have the pinnacle of 3D platforming. Putting a mission that meets such high quality midway through the game really feels like we have to earn the right to play it, which is why I'm happy that this galaxy is placed where it is among the others. Even in a game with some of the best level design the medium has ever seen, the Gusty Garden Galaxy still manages to stand above the rest, and establishes itself as the paragon of gameplay-focused design. It's a holy grail in its ambition, and a masterpiece in its execution. In the coming decades, as future game developers reflect on the classics, I have no doubt that the Gusty Garden Galaxy will be held in the highest regard. But when you reach the peak of something, that means you can only go downhill from there, which the following galaxy most certainly does. Join me next time and we'll be chasing after penguins, talking about manga, and finding disappointment in classic power-ups in the Freezeflame galaxy. I hope you'll join me there.